This is Hannibal here from the Hannibal TV on YouTube. And today we have great guests for what's going on in the US right now, especially in the New Jersey/New York area. They are from Nightcrawler, Eye in the Sky, a scientific research group researching UAPs. John and Jerry Tedesco, how are you guys doing? I know you're very busy. Thank you for taking the time to talk to
Oh,
me.
No problem.
thank you. Thank you. We're glad to be here.
Yeah, definitely.
So, just to start this off, what is your backgrounds and how did you get into starting to track UAPs? I believe, John, you are in the actual vehicle right now that you
Right.
guys
Yes.
use to track UAPs. You have quite an
Yes.
elaborate setup.
hmm
What's your background and how did it evolve into what you do now?
Well, my background is in engineering. I was an electrical engineer. I'm retired now, but I've done it for quite a few years. I work for a safety testing agency on Long Island, and I was involved in pretty much laboratory support and development of test fixtures and equipment. So I'm more or less an instrumentation engineer, and I did that for well over 25 years. Um, as far as our starts here, I mean this is going back to 2021, and it was the start of the Galileo project, where Dr. Avi Loeb from Harvard University was putting together a group to do some research at the time, and we had started with them. Since then, we've kind of moved out on our own direction, and we're independent researchers, and we now have quite a few papers published already. We have another one coming out the end of the month, and that's going to be I think it'll be an eye opener for some people. Dealing with, of course, some of the instrumented data that we have gotten over the 2-year period that involved radar anomalies, chromatic discharges, chromatic changes of light around these objects, and we're linking them all up, all of these different uh, uh, forces and fields, all part of the electromagnetic spectrum. So it seems to have affected pretty much anything that lies within the spectrum, whether it's light, it's radio waves, or it's ionizing radiation, or it's thermal IR, UV. It affects pretty much everything in the spectrum, and it follows the same rules as you would follow for light as well. But we've been, like I said, we've been doing this now this is going on the third year, and the research that we've done is off the Long Island, New York, which is on a barrier island called Robert Moses State Park, and we set up shop down there and gathered quite a bit of data off the coast. Stuff that we've been tracking for quite a while now.
And what do you make of all the activity going on right now in the New Jersey area? I just read that they're actually sending supposedly more troops to investigate what's
hmm
going on down there. But a lot of people are saying because they haven't been shot down yet at this point, and they are being seen over military installations in a lot of cases, that they
hmm
might actually be the US's, and it just might be a secret project or something. What do you guys make of it
Right.
all?
Yeah, that's quite bizarre. I mean, that's a mystery. I the lack of response is strange. I think the response is kind of strange, even from people that we've talked to in emergency management organizations. It's just it doesn't really make a lot of sense.
Yeah, it seems to be a mixed bag out there. It's
Yeah.
yeah, I'm not really quite sure, what we're dealing with. I mean, we experienced a little bit of that, in the research that we've been doing here locally, and there was a point in time in 2023 November that we had some sightings of what looked to us to be drone activity, and we were eyeballing one particular anomaly in the sky, which we had coined names as spheroids, and because they seem to have look like spheres. They're roughly about 2 to 4 meters in diameter, and they're near back and forth over the coastline, and we've been seeing that quite a bit. But like I said, in November, for at least a month's time, we saw quite a bit of activity that might have been drones. It might have been some kind of a drone activity. It's and it seemed like two of the objects were out there at once. And we're not quite sure why. And it's I don't know if Gerald has a little bit different take on it.
What was interesting is that period of time John's talking about. We kept that on as a question mark. What we were seeing, because we saw a mixed bag of things out there. There was the objects that appeared to look like drones. They had I mean, some of them had some flashing lights. They seemed to have searchlights on, but they were looking horizontally in the air and not towards the ground.
Yes,
and they were quiet, and they were following these smaller objects, which we did identify as that were anomalous. That John was talking about, the spheroids or polyhedral type objects that would rotate, and they had low luminosity. And these drone-like objects, and that's what we coined them, because we weren't exactly sure what they were, what they represented. They seemed to follow these objects in the sky back and forth. And this occurred, I don't know, a couple of nights in November that we watched.
Almost like a surveillance operation.
We weren't quite sure what that was all about, so we kept on a back burner as a question mark.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it sounds like, from what I've been reading of the reports, that there seems to be many spotted at various times, and they seem to be operating in formations a lot of the times. Have you noticed that as well?
Yes. Yeah. As a matter of fact, the formation that we saw out on the ocean, close to shore, I would say they were probably no further than 4 miles, and these objects would crisscross the ocean, and almost like in a form of a grid, and
they would be layered,
right,
in elevation.
Almost like they were looking for something, or they were observing something along those lines. Definitely some kind of a surveillance. It seemed like a surveillance operation of some sort,
And matter of fact, we actually had one of our researchers reach out to some of the agencies around the local law enforcement, Homeland Security, to find out if they had some kind of surveillance operation on the coast, or maybe it was Customs or Border Patrol or something. If they had some kind of activity. And of course, a lot of that, they had said no. That was our answer. But like I said, that's why we kept as a question mark. It was
right, and it wasn't something that we reported, with the paper, because we really weren't quite sure what it was. Prosaic, so more of a prosaic explanation, and But the interesting thing about even the drones, it's not something that you could hear. I mean, there wasn't anything audible.
They did appear large, though. They did appear.
Yeah, I would say definitely the sizes that they're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
The wingspans, there's some of the objects that we could identify were short winged. Some look like they could have been a quadcopter of some sort.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it definitely drone like. The lighting patterns were quite a bit different from what we were observing. The objects we were observing had no real lighting pattern, or a pattern that you'd recognize. It's and most of the time they would just be dark, or have a slight glow to them. But these other objects, they definitely, I mean, at first glance, you look at them, look like commercial traffic, but as we examined them and looked at them through our optical systems, or hyperspectral optical systems, we could identify that they definitely weren't part of the mix.
Yeah, they were smaller. They had something that resembled navigation lights, but not in the same kind of configuration, the same kind of flash patterns or color patterns. It's a little bit different.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Do you think that they are actual manned aircraft or drones that someone is operating, or is it a mixture of the two?
we would think it would have been autonomous, or it would have been remotely operated.
Right, yeah. And as far as who's behind it, I couldn't tell you.
Yeah,
That we
it
don't
It
know.
wasn't like we actually, we looked around the area. We didn't see anything look like an operating van, or maybe an operating RV that could have been used to operate from the ground. Uh, for as far as boats, we really couldn't identify any boat that might be operating it.
The staging area, yeah.
So, yeah, staging area, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's the objects themselves. I don't think they were any higher than 1,000 feet.
Yeah.
Yeah, because we're hearing some people say, including the Tennessee Congressman Tim Burchett, hinting that they might be China. Is it possible that a drone, do you think, could fly here potentially from China and stay up in the air that long? And we're seeing lights on a lot of these things. I don't know about the ones you're identifying, but if they were spy drones, do you think it would be wise to have them flashing lights like a lot of these are?
No, and that's one of the bizarre things. Why would you be flashing lights if you're trying to conduct a covert operation, a surveillance operation?
Right. I mean,
the other thing's the energy requirements to keep them up in the air.
I mean, as far as I mean, there has to be a staging area, a ship out at sea, or someplace that they could have been launched from. It's not. I mean, they certainly couldn't fly that far on the type of power systems that they have with the drones. I mean, even the best of lithium technology is not going to support that.
It would have to be larger drones anyway.
Exactly.
Like that.
Yeah.
There's a fan on here asking. I mean, you guys are you funded it yourself, but you've spent over 200,000 at least at this point, right?
Mm-hmm.
This person is asking, why are no billion-dollar news stations going out to investigate this stuff using top-of-the-line equipment? And it's mostly amateur people. You guys aren't amateur. You have a big background and a scientific background, but why is it mostly like amateur astronomers and people like Avi Loeb investigating this from Harvard, as you mentioned, with the Galileo project, who I don't think is billion-dollar funded, but he has decent funding now.
Yeah, he's got some.
I mean, obviously, he's got a pretty good funding. I mean, they're funded about $2 million to do what they're doing.
Right.
But, that's a question. That's a question for Avi.
Yeah. It's
whether
Yeah, I mean, it's something that I would hope that there would be more support for something like this. For if it's not coming from government, then then you would expect more from citizen scientists, citizen professionals that are out there doing this stuff, and and it's all for public awareness. I mean, the kind of stuff that we're doing. We have a website now that's posted. It's we're sharing information, and we have a Google Drive that is given access to. Folks are given access to look at what we've come up with, and and judge for yourself. I mean, we're instrumentation engineers, but we're not scientists. But we've been exploring it long enough to understand basically at least what we're trying to deal with, and coming up, of course, we're always coming up with new methods to get better data. These things are they can be difficult. They can be difficult to measure. Even we get questioned all the time as far as the quality of the video and so forth. But the interesting thing about that is that these objects, most of the time, you can't get clear video. It's there's a kind of the diffusion of light, and it's the cameras it's a trial with trying to get the focus with the cameras, and it's even on stationary locations, which is tough to do also, because we're in an environment where it gets windy and so forth, and those tripods, they have a tendency to vibrate and shake, and the video is all over the place,
and they're moving so fast, right? It's hard to focus in on them.
Exactly. That's the other thing, is like, this stuff happens in an instant. It's not a perfect laboratory condition. You just can't set up shop and then this thing is on key. It comes out and does what it's going to do. we're sitting there waiting, and it's just something we caught on the corner of our eye, or something in the background, and we got to quickly man the technology to try to get that data. We do have fixed sets of equipment on the RV. Of course, we use active radar, which is marine based, but we're using several systems. In the millimeter wave radars that are shorter distances, but for short type stuff, and anything that's within a 3-mile radius, we can certainly get detail on. The marine radars that we use, they'll go out 36 miles, but again, this is not something that it's easily tracked. The radar signatures are intermittent at best. Sometimes you'll be tracking something. They'll come up. They display as they present themselves as something that looks like fireflies on the display, on the PPI, on the radar. And as a matter of fact, we just wrote a paper about it. Trying to understand what kind of effects or forces could do that. And what we're leaning towards is some kind of a gravitational lensing effect that these things are producing. Where there's a strong enough gravitational field that it bends light, it distorts it, it's distorting radio waves. That's why we don't get a constant target, a continuous target, and it's probably the same interference patterns that that's they're seeing commercially or military. It's unless you have maybe a phased array radar system where you can target it on an ongoing basis. Most radar systems, it's elusive.
And I guess the person followed up with what they were saying. They mean, like, why are no news crews from New Jersey or New York actually making a greater effort with their cameras and their millions of dollars to capture something?
Right.
I even saw a news report from New Jersey recently where the reporter, and it was, I think, an NBC affiliate, she showed the footage of a drone on her camera. She said for some reason it couldn't be captured on the main news camera, but her cell phone was able to capture it.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, there's some big questions there. And it's so that's what puts it in the bizarre category. It's we should definitely have a better picture of what's going on and better answers from both the media and even some of the authorities.
Right.
Do you think the authorities know more? Because they seem to be telling us, don't worry, just ignore these drones. There's no immediate threat to these.
It's I think it's just it would just be speculation at this point as far as what they know, and that and I mean, it's something that I kind of suspect that they probably know a lot more than they're saying, but obviously most people know that something is going on. I mean, it's the extent of the sightings, the sheer numbers that are coming in, that are being reported, and a lot of the stuff, we believe is occurring, off the mainland. This is a more of a shore kind of experience with these objects. It's something that's probably originates somewhere in the oceans, which is a strong possibility, and they're being seen on the shores, mostly because you have, of course, population. You have high dense populations, but if we had more observers on the water, I would bet that there's more occurring over the water than there is over land.
Well, I do got to. Well, I mean, we've got to say this. I mean, the land sightings are actually growing,
right?
And to comment back on what we were saying is, those aren't answers. That's just not a threat. How would you know if it's a threat, even if it's not an immediate threat? Is it a long-term threat? The fact is, what if it's surveilling? What are they doing up there in the first place?
Mm-hmm.
And it has to be answered. I mean, that's unacceptable.
Right.
Just not acceptable.
Yeah.
Yeah. Why is it because they might originate in the water, that the Navy seems to be a lot more open about this than the Air Force, because we haven't really seen too many people from the Air Force come out. It's always Navy pilots, or we're seeing the videos
Right.
from Navy ships getting swarmed.
Yeah, the Air Force has been silent on it. Why, I don't know. You know, of course, the Navy pilots, they're seeing this stuff on a regular basis, and we've had an opportunity to talk to some of them, and of course, they've shared the same experiences with the media as well. But it doesn't really give us answers to why this is happening. It's the fact that we're seeing it. I mean, I live locally near the research area that we're looking at right now, which is a barrier island, and I'm seeing this stuff over my residence. I'm recording this stuff. In several occasions, I've seen it. I live near an airport, and I've seen them in the flight paths of commercial airports or commercial airliners. And in one particular case, I observed two objects that had a reddish starburst appearance to it. That were as an airliner went by, they followed the airliner in fairly close proximity and did a complete loop, two of them, one after the other, and just disappeared. And I remember just sitting there and being awestruck at it. I said, I've never seen anything like that before. It's but it's the behavior was bizarre, and this is before we even started the research. What we've been seeing out there is the activity is strange. It's a strange activity. It's we've recorded objects that would fall from the sky, head down to the water. We've seen objects submersed under the water. We've even been exposed to something that during one of our investigations that we still can't wrap our heads around.
And this is one of the it's a screenshot from one of the pictures you filmed here. Yeah. This seems to be a common thing. There's like one bigger ball of lights type object, and then many multiple dot objects that appear to be moving on their own around these balls of lights.
Yes, this was quite interesting. We took a video of this. The bright central orb in the middle, we can actually see in the visible range. It was very intense luminosity. The satellite objects that you see circling that orb, these could not be seen visibly, only in the infrared, and they were all moving in unison across the sky from west to east along the shoreline. And the interesting thing is that we actually had sudden battery drains while we were filming this, and it actually cut out the video. But we have at least a minute or so of video of this.
Yeah, I wonder if he could present the video, because I'm mostly finding the clips online. I did see the video of this where it looked like the UAP was very, very close to the flight of this commercial airliner.
Yeah, I'll let John talk about that one.
Yes, that was an early morning observation. This was in the direction of John F. Kennedy Airport, JFK. And it's a central hub. It's a large airport, and I had a P1000 camera, and a Nikon P1000, and I had zoomed out. It's got 125 times optical zoom, and I had zoomed out, and with the image stabilizer, I was observing this aircraft coming in, and I noticed something in the corner of my eye, and I was able to stabilize the camera. And I could see this object coming up, in the opposite direction and almost under the belly of the aircraft. But it would be really hard to determine that. But what I did a couple of times is adjust the focal point, and I realized that these objects were, they were both reaching that same focal distance, and it seemed to me that they were relatively close to each other as far as the if we look at the depth of field and distance from the camera. Other objects, I could, dismiss as far as being normal air traffic, that was in the background. But this is something that, you had a strange had a strange had strange movement to it. It's the object would actually wobble, and it looked like it was completely white. It looked like a tic tac. So I had watched it for a period of time until I just lost it from view. But it wasn't a linear flight. It wasn't smooth. Like I said, this thing, it had a tendency to become unstable. And I mean, I guess some people would say it could be a balloon or this that, but I mean, the one thing that we saw on it, it remained remained like a cylinder, but through 23 seconds worth of video, we saw a strange pattern of lights on it come on and then go off. And it was only for that one frame. There was no other frames that we could see that had a normal navigation style pattern or flash rate. So to me, it certainly didn't look like a balloon or anything like that. It's I mean, a drone possibly, but not at that speed. Not at that speed. I mean, it's
no. The other thing is it was moving as the aircraft was moving one direction. It was moving the opposite direction, but it was moving faster than the aircraft was moving in its own direction.
Yeah,
the other thing is it either had a very reflective surface to give off which we gave off that would give off that white light, or the color itself was white. The other thing, it had no flight surfaces, it had no wings, no tail section. We had actually zoomed in on it, and in one frame of that video, the thing does a little rotation, and when it changes its orientation a little bit, we saw a flash, a large flash. When we zoom in on that frame where the flash was, the object actually looks like a club shape. It's wider on one end, and in the area where it was wider, that's the direction of travel. So it wasn't even aerodynamic, great aerodynamic configuration. The other thing is on the club, the wider end, there was two lights on that club shape that were very bright. They were either lights or very also very reflective surfaces. So this looks like a constructed object. It was odd looking. It wasn't didn't look like any kind of aircraft or even drone I'm familiar with.
Someone has a question here, and I've been seeing videos of these, and I recently watched the Alien Investigation George Knapp series where they talked about these black helicopters after UFO appearances. Somebody's saying that they've seen them in Los Angeles. Have you ever witnessed anything like this? These long black helicopters that seem to appear around instances of UAP?
There were helicopters out there. There was a one time there was a couple of military helicopters. There was we heard a claim that there might have been a boat turned over.
Yeah, I mean, we get a lot of activity simply because we're by several airports, and we got MacArthur Airport here, which is very local, and and there's military helicopters that take off from there all the time. So it would be for us, it would be kind of difficult to qualify one way or another what they might be, but we do see them on occasion, and and then there are other times where you see 3 or 4 of them at one time. I'm not sure if we could equate that to what's going on here.
I'll just play a clip from your News Nation interview where you're talking about 3 or 4 going at the same time. This is one of your videos where there does appear to be 3, 4, maybe 6 at a time.
Yes.
So what could you tell us the backstory on that?
Okay. These were objects that we had watched them follow a jet landing in a landing slope going towards the airport. You can see the flashing lights. You see the aircraft above with the flashing lights and navigation lights. We had zoomed in on it. But these objects, when you zoom in on them, they look like you can never see any navigation lights. They look like orange fireballs. There were about 4 or 5 of them. Right. And they were following this jet, trailing the jet. But they were completely different. Like I said, and it was quite easy for us to look at and see the navigation lights of any aircraft. These didn't have any. Right.
We and at the time we use high zoom cameras. I mean, they're low light sensitive. I mean, we can zoom in on an aircraft that you'll just see the flashing of a navigation light. and we can zoom in on those aircraft, from 5 to 10 miles away, and we can get enough of a profile to identify that as an aircraft. These orbs of light, they're almost like starbursts, and you'll zoom in on them, and all you'll see is just that. You'll see something that looks like a rotating starburst, with no recognizable navigation lights or any kind of a periphery as far as an additional structure like a fuselage or wingspan or anything like that. You won't see anything like that.
Yeah, you should at least even with zooming at that range, we should be able to see the silhouette of the fuselage, and we couldn't even see that.
Yeah, I mean, quite recently too, we were given a video by a police officer here on the island, and of an observation that was made in the early morning hours over central Long Island, Middle Country Road, and I do have that queued up. We could look at that, and this is pretty much
let's see it.
So let's see. I guess I'll share my screen.
And somebody was asking while you're queuing that up, have you guys been tempted to actually go to the hot spot in New Jersey, in I think Morris Township or something, New Jersey, where all this is happening?
That's something we were discussing, is the possibility of going out there.
Yes,
maybe with the RV.
I don't know if you guys can see this.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it's up now.
All right. Okay. So this is a recording by a police officer from a cell phone, and unfortunately, this is the problem with the cell phone. It's they rate them as high megapixel resolution, but the only problem is they have very high compression rates. So you'll see down here, this on the right here is a telephone pole, and it's out of focus. It's simply because the video is being moved back and forth. And when that happens, you lose the detail. If it was a stationary image for a period of time, you would see things, basically, clear up, come into focus. You have a little bit more detail, but it's kind of hard. But you do see the basic, components of what's going on over here, and this is something that we've been seeing on a regular basis. So let me play this video.
And I should make one small correction: is the police officer John's talking about. It was the police officer handed us the video, but it was a friend of that individual who had taken it about 4:00 in the morning.
Right.
Is there a hot time for this, for these things to appear? And the other thing, I know you've seen some of them during the day, like that, like this one that you've shown here.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
But could they potentially be there during the day too, and we're just not seeing them as clear during the day?
Well, that's the thing with the sun. Depending on where the sun is, it can actually occlude your view. Kind of, your eyes are more sensitive at night. If something's luminous, you can see it easier than something that might be very reflective and reflect the sun. It makes it more difficult to see during the day.
All right. So, for some reason, she's not queuing up properly. But let me see if I can move it along, just to get an idea of what's going on. So apparently this bus driver was looking up, and he was filming this thing above the telephone pole. Now you'll see the object itself. Now what I did is I took the video and I zoomed in on it just to get a better idea of what we were looking at here. And you'll see that there seems to be a kaleidoscope of color around the object and the object is rotating. It's rotating like a cube, a polyhedron of some sort. And as it's rotating, you'll see this color shifting. I don't believe that the colors are there. It's changing color. I believe it's, this might be a form of gravitational lensing, where you're going red shift, blue shift. As the object rotates in the direction of the viewer, it blue shifts, and as it rotates away, it's undergoing a red shift because of what's, possibly a concentrated, gravitational field of some sort. And if I move it along, you'll see this you'll see this effect.
I've heard Lou Elizondo say that these things are kind of could be encased in that type of field. Is that
Yes.
what you guys are seeing too? Like that's how they're able to make these wild turns, and if there happens to be someone inside, it might protect whoever's inside from
Yes.
the gravitational forces.
Yeah, there does seem to be some kind of envelope or bubble around them.
Right, and that's
actually trapping the light too.
Yeah, there's definitely some kind of halo. We've seen this before, but there's also dark areas. There seem to be near the center, and we're kind of wondering whether or not that might be a form of high gravitational areas. They're concentrated areas, possibly where a field is, either being focused in or out of the object. And, where that focusing is occurring, that field is much stronger. And we believe that those areas might be the absence of light. Because we'll see, even like this, you'll see a bright source of light in the front here. And in these areas where it's dark, the edges are very defined. Almost like there's no bleed over. There's no fringing. There's no fringing of the color. And that looks to us like it's just an area where it's not allowing the light, to come through.
It almost looks like poles. If you have a very
possibly poles. We see this down here, but as they're rotating, and we've gone frame by frame, you could see in the direction of rotation. Like I said, if the object is rotating towards the observer, it seems to blue shift, and as it's moving away, it red shifts.
And we've seen this repeatedly on a lot of these objects. When we look closely at them, they when their luminosity seems to drop, they have this polyhedral shape and they have a rotation, and you see this kaleidoscope of colors. And I had spoken to both the police officer and the friend who took the video, he actually got out of the vehicle because it grabbed his attention. It was so stunning that he stepped out of the vehicle and filmed it. He says it was stationary in the sky. It was just sitting up there. And he said it looked almost like a Christmas ornament rotating, or a disco ball with all the different, and with the full colors of a rainbow. But he said he saw a lot of, blue and red.
Yeah. And there's something else physically about the structure too. And this we've seen too, is that there seems to be like these dark areas they'll seem to have borders on one side where you'll have these, almost like right angles. They're almost coming together at right angles, possibly around some kind of a polyhedron. But it seems like you have an area or an absence of light that is extended around one side, and just a small area on the other. And if you looked at these objects, and we've done it with FLIR cameras, the envelope that they produce around them it looks almost like a heart-shaped pattern. It's I know with some of the Navy videos they talk about that the area is if it's black hot, the area becomes white because it's colder than the environment around it, and we're kind of wondering whether or not that's the case, or if it's actually just the absence of light, and it's really not a cold area. It's just the way the camera is capturing it, the FLIR camera. They're areas of concentrated gravitational fields, and it seems like they may be colder than the environment.
How many approximately different types of craft or anomalies have you seen? Because I noticed you guys have posted this picture too.
Yes,
looks a little different than the other.
Right.
Is there any?
Yeah, not so much different because these objects are in the infrared, so we won't see the color. We don't see the colors, the chromatic or
the chromatic displays.
Yeah, chromatic displays from them. What you do see, and this is the object on the top. This is an inversion. This is an inverted image because we wanted to try to pull out some detail, And what we do see is something that looks polyhedral in shape in the center, with one side that's either a luminous side or it's a highly reflective side, which is reflecting ambient light. Around the object is an area that looks almost like it's where light is diffused, almost like an envelope of some sort around the object. And we've seen this a number of times.
Well, the interesting thing, if you look at it, the center has a squarish look to it. Like I said, we think the whole structure is more polyhedral, but the center has a square, which may be one plane of a polyhedral object, and it could be a square plane.
Right, multiplane, yeah.
So it's a multiplaned object. So if this is still, you might see that square, and if it's rotating, you'll see the flat plane sides rotating. But the more flat plane sides you have, the more rounder it becomes. But the other things, you do see like an envelope, it's trapping the light. It's completely circular, and this actually resembles what the Navy pilots were describing. It's a cube within a sphere. Maybe it kind of
resembles this UK airport thing too. Yeah. That was this was shot by a pilot in the UK.
Mm-hmm.
That's close up, but that was seen to go up in the sky after as well.
Right. And then we notice there's some smooth surfaces to it near the center that were interesting.
Well, it's interesting is most of the objects, like the same ones we're seeing, is they're spherical. Most of the objects are spherical, and that seems to be the case. It's consistent.
Yeah, and size-wise, they seem to be. We've actually measured distances on some of these objects, and we were able to calculate its physical size, and they tend to be anywhere between 2 and 4 meters in diameter.
And of course they described I think the pilot described that object as being the size of a small car, which is that's about right. That's about the that's consistent size, a small vehicle.
What's the biggest object that you have encountered?
Yeah, that's hard to say. We did see a triangular object that resembled almost like an isosceles triangle. It's there was 3 points of light, and the thing that's difficult is we tried to. It was low over the horizon, so you really couldn't look through it to see if there was star constellations out there that that could basically give you some reference as far as whether or not these are individual objects. We believe they were, but because they were very stable. They in one case it was out there for 45 minutes in 35-mile-an-hour wind gusts, and we had marked it the locations on our central monitor inside the mobile lab, and over a 45-minute period, it did not move at all. It was remained very stable in that one particular spot. But as we were out there, at the 45-minute mark, the object seemed to just disappear, moved quickly up into the atmosphere, and we could see a red flash of something underneath. But it didn't move as one. There seemed to be 3 separate elements to it.
Yeah, that's a separate point. It was on initial appearance, it could look like one solid object because they seem to be synchronized or networked. But like it says, when we panned over, it was up there for 45 minutes. When we panned over, and they started to dissipate, and they changed their distances from each other, and we saw this bright red flash, and they were all gone. So we're pretty certain it was 3 individual objects.
I wish I had your cameras here, because the other night, December 4th, I actually caught some dots that look similar to some of the stuff you're showing that were going in like a V formation above the base here in Wichita. But here's a weird one I just wanted to show you guys. I only noticed it after, like, I was filming the dots that were moving around, but then there seemed to be this area that I could see only on the video where it looks like a circular discoloration.
Yes.
That I'm not sure what that was, but I certainly couldn't see it with my naked eye. I don't know if it's just a video splotch or what, but I found that a little unusual. I'm sure if I had thermal cameras and stuff, I
Right.
could see it a lot better.
Well,
Yeah, it helps with the multispectral cameras. It helps to define if it is actually something else, something there, or or a lighting effect, or
yeah.
aberrations
Well,
from
yeah,
the
and there's
whatever.
multiple there's of course multiple components to that. It's some of these objects are just they're not putting off. They're not very luminous. I should say that any ambient lighting that seems to um, they give them mass that you could see. There's a reflective surface to some extent, but most of them are dark. They're dark objects. You need low light infrared cameras in order to see them, and there are times when they become luminous, even luminous to a point where you see them in the visible light. But we've actually measured them, in the IR, in the deeper IR, in the short wave, which is beyond any kind of near infrared camera system that is being used to look at them. I mean, it's the camera system that we have for the SWIRE, or the SWIR they call them. It's it's shortwave infrared, and that those cameras are relatively expensive. I mean, a camera that we use is in upward of about $14,000. In order to see that
Wow.
range of light.
What's your website, by the way, for people that want to check it out? And you also have a book out called
Yes.
Nightcrawler: All Eye in the Sky.
Yeah.
Right. So the domain name for the website is makes it easy. It's just all one word. It's called Nightcrawler Eye on the Sky .org, and it can be pulled up anytime. We're going to try to maintain the website, keep it updated. Any new news, put the news on there. Of course, any of the data that we have. We also want to spread the word as far as other organizations that are involved that would like to work with us, and we got quite a bit of advertising to do. We don't have quite a few organizations now that that we want to spotlight, that are out there, boots on the grounds, and doing this stuff, and trying to understand it, and move us a little bit closer, hopefully, toward disclosure.
Ultimately, we'd like to make that website a one-stop shop that has all the information on there and other data,
Right.
Raw data on these objects, and good scientific data.
Right. And the papers, we've already put the some of the papers on. We want to share the papers from other institutions as well. And basically share resources. It's we want to have an advertisers page for, like I said, other groups that are involved in it, that takes you to their sites as well, and anything that they can present, because it should be open source. It really should. If we're in this to try to understand it as a society, we need advocates, and it seems like it's going to be the public, citizen scientists, or whatnot, but it certainly can't keep it to yourself, and you can't work in silos. That's not going to help anybody.
Yeah, I want to comment on something like that. About that is I've heard other scientists from academia suggest that it's the PhDs and the scientists who should be looking at this, solely looking at this, and we don't believe that's the case. I mean, the first line of inquiry you would expect to be engineers, a multidisciplined engineers such as ourselves, to look at this. I mean, we're somebody who understands how things work, propulsion systems, that kind of thing. It's something we're familiar. We worked in aerospace. We worked in a lot of different areas. So we would be the first people, the first kind of specialist or professional to be able to determine that. To make that determination, and to be able to separate a prosaic from something that's anomalous. I mean, certainly specialists in physics and theoretical physics are going to be brought in and look at that data.
Yeah,
and go further. If something is anomalous, but the first line of inquiry should be done. It's perfectly reasonable for us to be doing it.
Right. There's lots of roles for many different disciplines and professionals. It's police officers and pilots and even lawyers and doctors. I mean, this is something that needs to be opened up, and it's it can't just fall down to one specialty or one institution or a type of institution.
Yeah, it's not just academia needs to look at it. There's industry specialists who have a track record of getting these things done.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's got to be looked at from industrial scientists to academic scientists, and everybody's going to be working collaborating, working together. You can't work in these silos, which is pretty much ridiculous.
Right. I mean,
it's just silly.
Yeah, I would agree.
What do you guys think about the interdimensional theory? You're saying you see them mostly in the sky and in the water. Have you seen anything that would lead you to believe that they're actually appearing from another dimension?
I mean,
well, that's something that's got to be looked at, and it should be on the table. I mean, if we're reaching towards an extraterrestrial hypothesis, I think it's just as reasonable to suggest the possibility of an ultra-terrestrial hypothesis or a crypto-terrestrial hypothesis. We're really not sure at this point, but there are things that the dynamics are very strange. We do see objects disappear and suddenly appear. They appear in one area of the sky and they seem to appear in another area of the sky, and it appears to be the same object. So I mean, it should certainly should be on the table.
Right? Is that the case, or is it these objects that can just do instantaneous acceleration? I mean, with that we don't know. I mean, some of the sightings that are presented and if you listen to some of the experts like Dave Fravor, one of the Navy pilots that talked about the tic tac that basically bounced around like a ping pong ball, with without any inertia involved. I mean, that's pretty amazing. Or the Connecticut police officer that as he shined his police special, his flashlight up at it, that the object suddenly was just on the other side of the lake. Is it movement or is it interdimensional travel? We don't know that. We don't have any information other than some of the things that some of the data initially seems to be opening up or paving the way towards is some kind of a gravitational interaction, gravitational field, so especially gravitational lensing. Some of the telltale signs I think are out there. I mean, the changes in light, the characteristics of the light around these objects, or reflected light on it, or source light. I mean, you can see as these things are rotating, as they're moving, you can see red shift, blue shift. You can see some of this stuff, and we're also seeing the same patterns, very similar patterns with radio waves, with GPS signals, with LiDAR. Yeah, I mean, it seems to be, I mean, of course, anything in the electromagnetic spectrum should behave in the same way as light, certainly radio waves. And what we've been doing is targeting or referencing large sea vessels out on the water, something as large as a freighter. I mean, so not a ship that's greater than 800 feet long. We get these huge reflections, huge returns. And we want to look at these objects at a distance. And when we do see these unknowns, these anomalous objects that is in the line of sight of the scanner, the radar dome, we can see certain patterns, and we've recorded them. They seem to have what they call anomalous propagation of the radio waves. The radio waves don't come; they're no longer directed back at the antenna. They seem to bounce around. They seem to lens, and they chase. You'll see these signals chasing over a PPI or the display of the radar system, and we'll see these things track in multiple quadrants, and which is kind of impossible because you're dealing with an arc rotation of only 5.2 degrees from the antenna, and it takes 2.5 seconds on a marine radar to make a complete 360. So it's moving past this point rapidly, and the fact that this signal is chasing the radar, the only thing that makes some degree of sense, is that it's being resynchronized as the radar is coming back around, and for a radio signal to take that kind of time, those are what they call long delay echoes. They're delayed echoes. Same thing with GPS signals. But this has been around. This has been recorded since the 1920s. These LDEs, they call them, or UFEs. The unexplained field echoes. So there's a history about it. Radio engineers have known about it. People, of course, that have been using radar, whether it's active, passive, or whatnot, it's producing the same effect. And if there is gravitational lensing going on out there, it can certainly explain the multipath signals. It can certainly explain the long delays, the tracks, the quadrant tracks that these objects take. And it's basically, like I said, you'll see an object on the scope at a certain range marker, and you'll see an almost like a circular painting of the object, almost completely around 360 degrees on that display, which is odd, which means that the signal is coming back late.
And I should also mention that John's saying that we're detecting an anomalous object on radar along with maybe the ship in the background, right, that creates this long creates the visual of this long delay echo on the radar. But the fact is, we also have other data points. We have multispectral cameras that are also catching these same objects within the vicinity of, let's say, of a ship, or when it's in between us and a ship. Is when we'll see these long delay echoes.
Yeah, I mean, there's enough.
There seems to be an influence.
Yeah, I mean, to make it statistically significant. Yeah. I mean, that's what we're seeing, and we're trying to set up those conditions. It's an ongoing study. We have the paper. The paper has been accepted. It went through peer review process, and it should be out before the end of December. And I think folks are going to find it interesting. It's on our website right now. And like I said, the formal publication should be out soon.
And you mentioned the hypothesis of crypto-terrestrials, where that, for anyone that doesn't know, I guess that could be a race that's hidden somewhere on Earth. Yes. I've only heard that word for about the past 4 or 5 years. How could that be scientifically possible?
Well, if you look at other areas, and even in biology, I mean, so recently we discovered other microorganisms that can cause disease. Prions, proteins that fold in unusual ways that can almost act as something that's living, but it's not. We see it in viruses that aren't quite alive. They're in between that state of living and non-living organisms. They're just a strand of RNA. And they perform lifelike functions. Like I said, and those recently discovered large viruses frozen in the Arctic and the Antarctic. They're called these macro-sized viruses, very large viruses. There's the other thing is anything beyond, I think, 500,000 years. There's this turnover in nature, where the evidence actually disappears, even the remnants of what they were disappears. So there could have been civilizations. There could have been other domains of life that have existed here, and maybe they found a way to stay hidden. Maybe they descended, maybe they're in the oceans, maybe descended underground. And most microbes are under the soil anyway, and their mass, their biomass, is far larger than any living mass on the surface of this planet, and that was hidden for a long time. And most microbiologists will know that.
Very interesting. John, is there anything else that you have on file there that the people watching might find interesting?
Yes. As a matter of fact,
I'm sure there's thousands of videos that they would find interesting, but something that stands out.
Yeah, so
that's great.
Maybe the orb over the land, or maybe the orb that goes laterally to the shoreline.
Yeah, and I saw that on your News Nation interview, like the peekaboo orb that was kind of like hiding from you, and like that was a weird. That would almost be like what would be considered ghost activity in the past.
Yes, it seems it's very similar. That thing did that peekaboo 4 times behind the sign.
What are you thinking when you're seeing that?
It takes you back. It really it makes you question your eyes. It makes you question yourself. And if it wasn't on camera, you would.
Is there any fear? Like, is this thing going to do something harmful to me, or is it just like, wow, I've never expected this to see this so close?
That was more like a wow moment, because it seemed playful. Then there's other incidents like we had in August August 28th one night, and that was more startling and more fight or flight response.
Can you guys see this? See this
Yeah,
video?
it's
Okay, so
moving.
yeah, so this is an object, and this is an analysis video. What we did was we're going frame by frame, and we zoomed in on it to get a better look at what we were looking at with this object. Now you'll see it's got the same kaleidoscope effect out there, of course we were accused by some debunkers that this is nothing more than an airplane
Well, let's
and
just
so
say the
on.
name, Mick West. Miss Mick West claimed it was an
I wasn't
airplane.
going to do it.
Yeah, it's on an airplane. It says I actually looked at this with a pair of binoculars. The mass is too compact. There's no anti-collision beacons which would be very obvious.
Right.
There's so many data points that
Yeah,
that Mick West didn't say.
the cloud-based ceiling, the cloud-based height, I should say, was roughly about 2,000 feet that night. So, an aircraft that was at that altitude, I mean, would have been very easy to see, and we would have tracked it on our radar as well. This was not the case. This is an object that was just below that cloud layer. It was polyhedral in shape. It was rotating, and as it was rotating, you saw this kaleidoscope of color. In some cases, there was some kind of a luminous side to it, one of the sides. And as it rotates 180 degrees around, it goes dark. You don't see it. It's only this either it's a luminous or reflective characteristic of the object. But it is bending light in such a way that it's producing this kaleidoscope of color. And what's interesting about this object, too, is that there was another object that was basically moving vertically toward the ground, was moving through the cloud layers. And, you'll see it eventually, but let me see if I can speed this up just a little bit. So you'll see it goes from a luminous state, and then it's back to a more of a polyhedral shape as it's rotating. And then just above it, you'll see that there's other form of light. And this is not. I can tell you right now that this is not the lamps from the high energy lamps from an aircraft on the cloud layers. That's not the case.
That was a suggestion also by people like Mick West and all that this could be the forward-looking lighting of the aircraft lighting up a cloud. We would see the forward lights. They're at 600-watt lights. They're very bright lights. They would easily show up on the infrared.
Right, and then you'll see that this thing, as it's moving down, you'll see it take shape. It's roughly the same size as the object that you see on your left here, the lower left. And then you'll see that they're rotating with different colors. As one is rotating away, it's red. The other one's rotating towards us, it's blue. You'll see this change. Eventually, as they get close, you see what looks like their synchronized rotation, and the colors seem to align. They seem to synchronize, but almost to a point where these two objects come together and form some kind of cohesion.
The other thing is this light. It looks like an object that's behind the clouds or within the clouds. The light is compact, so it's the cloud layer is actually trapping the light.
It's almost like a movie screen. It's casting it's lighting the insides of the clouds at that point.
Yeah, I was going to say further that if this was the outside lighting of an aircraft lighting up a cloud from the outside, that light would be dispersed along the outside of the cloud. It would be wider.
Yeah, you'd see the length of the beams.
Yeah.
Do you think these want to be seen? Obviously, some of them don't have lights, and as you say, can only be shot with certain cameras. But something that is flashing, do you think they're trying to get attention?
They appear to be at times that seem to want to be seen or be obvious.
Right.
Other times, no.
Other times that they just basically maybe want to stay in the shadows. They don't want to be observed.
Yeah, most of the time when we track these objects, they would remain in the infrared spectrum. Occasionally being visible, but mostly in infrared. So that would tell us it's something that didn't want to be seen.
Right. I know if you guys can see this full screen.
We can see the entire screen. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So Yeah, now you'll see that they start to synchronize. The colors are roughly the same. And you can see there's two distinct shapes in there. Very distinct shapes. To see one is it's fading, one's growing. Now you see the blue and the red on one side rotating in two different directions. And of course, frame by frame, you can see that. And then there seems to be a pattern around the object itself, which is not just the compression schemes of the camera. This camera, for the most part, it's there's very little compression. I think it's a 3:2.
The other thing is when they cohese these two objects is when we slow the frame rate down, we can see that once they cohese, they both rotate the same direction.
Right. And that's what's happening here. You're starting to see it's twice the size, twice the illumination, and you'll see at times in the cloud layer. These are all clouds. You'll see that there's reflected light, blue, red, off to the sides as this thing is rotating. So it's lighting up other areas of the sky. It's not in just one direction like headlights. It's around the object in 360 degrees. Which is just above the aircraft now, or whatever this thing is. The other thing is to consider is that these cloud layers have a cloud base height of 2,000 feet. So doing triangulation based on the angle that we're looking at, the object was no more than maybe 500 meters from where we were.
Based on the different types of objects that you're seeing, I know humans have very different types of vehicles, so it's hard to guess just based on that. But would you say they're all coming from the same thing, or could there be multiple explanations for these type of visitations?
Well, that's a good point. As we as humans, we make all kinds of car shapes and all for our own likes, our own configurations. So I mean, I guess we could also suggest that if this is another race, an intelligent race constructing these things, or it could be for the functionality. It could be for pure functionality. I don't know.
And as far as like the different movements, I mean, it could just be, as you mentioned, the same visitors or whatever, doing it for whatever purpose. It's not necessarily different visitors that travel in different types of vehicles, but there seems to be a lot of different types.
Yeah, I mean that's certainly a valid possibility too. That's something we definitely everything's got to be looked at, and be probably, and we have to follow the data or where that leads.
Well, I really appreciate that you guys do this type of work, and you give a lot of credibility to this topic, which, for one thing, where I'm from in Canada, people still don't believe it overall, and it doesn't get much coverage. In the US, it's taken a lot more seriously, and it's because of people like you doing this research.
Thank you.
That are highly credible. So thanks a lot for that. Nightcrawler, eyeonthesky.org is your website. You also have a Facebook page. Where can people follow you? I know your book is available on Amazon, John.
Yep. Yes. So a lot of the links and so forth will be on the webpage. And again, that's Nightcrawler, eyeonthesky.org. And there's
also a site on Facebook.
Right. Yeah, we're gonna have a link to that site as well. But like I said, most of the data we're gonna populate on our webpage, and anyone that wants to share information, we can certainly provide links on the page as well. That basically keeping it as an open source for anybody that wants to collaborate and share resources. We're certainly open to that. From like I said, from the beginning, we've been transparent, and we will continue to be.
Do you happen to have that peekaboo video handy for anyone that may
I think I do. Let me
Yeah.
take a look.
because that is quite something, and I think some people might find it shocking that haven't seen it before, just how close it is.
Yeah, that really got our attention.
Yeah, a small orb, a much smaller orb.
Yeah, it's probably about the size of a basketball, I would say, right?
Yeah.
When you were with the Galileo project, was there anything that stood out to you guys from the research that you were doing there?
Well, what we did there is we were there to assist their engineering team in helping them develop their platform. And we suggested using sensor systems. At the beginning, I think obviously was talking about telescopes and using different types of telescopes. And we suggested that, we have, if you use there's a bunch of different kinds of sensors you could be using. And you would have a lot of different modes to layered modes to track, try to track these things.
Right, and they're binary sensors. A lot of them, they're one shots. They're binary, and they're very sensitive. They're some of the detectors can pick up a a small campfire from 28,000 feet. They're very very sensitive detectors.
That's our system you're talking about.
Yes.
Yeah, that's not the Harvard system.
No. But like I said, this was some of the suggestions that we did have. All right.
They took their own approach. Like I said, they wanted a fixed platform on the roof of Harvard. They actually put it in another location, but our goal was to use a mobile platform so we can move around. We'd have some mobility.
Let's see.
And someone said, "Get the RV to New Jersey."
Yeah,
we'd like to.
We're definitely open to that. Resources are expensive. It's a big Triton V10 engine, and it loves gasoline.
Yeah, then I have to try to grab some time from work so I could head out.
If any rich person sees this and they want to help fund you, where could they go? Because you never know who might watch this.
Same website.
They can contact us through the website directly, whatnot. We'll definitely respond, and there's even a donation button on there. So even if it comes in small amounts, anything to keep us out on the road and keep us, boots on the ground. We have lots of members that are volunteering for this, and they'd be happy to get that data.
So there it is, right? So if you guys could explain what's going on.
Yeah.
Okay, so start that over at the beginning, John. Yeah, you'll see it a couple times. Pops out about 4 times, but you'll see it. It here comes out from behind the sign. John tries to focus in on it. It'll go back behind the sign. It does this about. I think you see it 3 times, but
3 or 4 times. It's when I was setting up the camera. I didn't realize this was an infrared camera, and this is a special optics. It's got a image intensifier.
So there's the orb. You just saw it. Now watch.
Yeah. So I see this thing in the corner of my eye as I'm setting up the camera, because you can see that I'm all over the place because I'm setting it up on a tripod, and then I see this object through the viewfinder.
Yeah.
And I try to look at it, see it
moving
moving
behind the sign. Now
back behind the light, behind the sign, and as I move it away, I see it
just popped out
back out again.
And then you'll see now it's going back behind the sign. It's playing these games. And there was nobody out there. There was no ships out there. There was nothing else out there.
No, it's nothing you could see with the naked eye.
And you would think if that was Russian or Chinese, they wouldn't be goofing around with you like that.
Yeah, that'd be kind of odd behavior.
Unless they have a real sense of humor.
yeah, basically, right? Yeah, that was the most playful thing we saw.
Yeah, and we have seen orbs of that size too.
And you'll notice that a lot of people who have gotten into this, even Lou Elizondo claims to have seen orbs in his house.
Yeah, supposedly the green orbs are actually considered more dangerous, I've heard. I don't know if you've heard that, but some people have received negative effects.
Yeah, some people claim that the color of the orb could be linked, could be closely related to the behavior, but I don't know enough about that.
Right. If these things are from other planets, could they possibly infect our planet with something from another planet or from space, if they land here or they come in our atmosphere with something that could cause some type of pandemic here?
Oh, potentially, yeah. I mean, if you have a planet that has developed life through microbes,
It's,
a microbe that's very different from what's on Earth, and it's possible may have some pathogenic properties to it. So,
yeah,
oh, I see. I see what you're saying.
yeah. Here's another video I'd like to queue up. Let's see.
Okay.
Yeah, it sounds like something out of Orson Welles. The War of Worlds or something.
Yeah, it seems like people aren't really panicking over all this drone incursions. People are either very interested in researching it or they don't believe it or nothing has happened, so they've just moved on with their lives. They're like, okay, there's drones
Yeah.
everywhere. We're used to it now. We're just going to keep going.
I think we're beyond that point as a society. I mean, I don't think young people today. I don't think it would surprise anybody. It's they probably go about their daily business anyway.
It's probably much more acceptable.
It's much more. They're much more accepting of stuff like this, a phenomenon like this.
I'm wondering if the news just eventually stops reporting on it, if it's just going to continue and it just won't make the major news anymore, because it hasn't really made the national news too much.
Yeah, most of the stuff is on the internet. It's it's a shame that it's not in more mainstream. I mean, it's something as important as this.
That's what makes it odd. It makes it really odd. I was having a conversation with.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Okay.
Wait a minute.
So this was an orb that was bluish. It also was changing color. Completely silent, and it was riding along the coastline. It was very low to the water.
Yeah, and you could it's very it's definitely low to the water, and you could see that this thing is rotating. It's more of an visible light spectrum now. You can see of course the color. You could see blue. It does redshift, but it's rotating. It's rotating at a rapid clip at this point.
If you notice, there's two separate objects. There's one on the water.
Right.
An object on the water is also an anomaly. That's actually following this and keeping pace with it. And it disappears from time to time. Whether it's sticking under the water or just disappearing is hard to say, but it was following this.
Yeah.
Yeah, let me go back. Let me show you. Yeah, so this we caught.
And this was a pretty large object. This was probably about the size of a car.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Wait a minute.
Of course, that's the Atlantic Ocean. It's a shoreline.
And you'll see that this is what we were talking about. You'll see that some of this video is out of focus. And this is because the focal range of the camera, we're trying to focus on the object. So you can see that there are two different focal ranges. If we focused on the cresting of the waves here and on the shore, the object would be out of focus, and you could see that as we're going back and forth. So again, some folks look at this and say, well, why is it out of focus and this, that, because we're actually concentrating. We're trying to concentrate on the object itself. We don't want it to fringe and basically appear to be distorted.
The other thing is the object is extremely bright. Yeah, you're never going to get a sharp focus on it. It's extremely bright, but you can see, you can make it out. It's a large luminous orb that appears to have some rotation. It's actually at times it's changing its color schemes, color spectrum.
Right, and that's what we believe might be some form of gravitational lensing around the object. And that could also be affecting light itself, the focal point of light. It's if it's being lensed. It's distorting. It's distorting light rays as well. The same that it would do to which we're encountering with radio waves. It doesn't seem to matter as far as wavelength. Other than shifting it one direction or the other. And some of the behavior, we've looked at the I and Q signals, which is basically where it places the object on the screen, you have something called a polar coordinate system, and you need those two components in order to decode this and put it on the screen in reference to distance and direction. But we look at those signals specifically to see exactly what's going on, and there are some telltale signs. I mean, there's late signals coming back, which is ignored by the radar. Other signals that fall within the synchronization pulses, which occur at about 80 microseconds. Then you have a length of time, that a window of time when this antenna is rotating, the scanner is rotating 360 degrees. So some of these signals are being caught as the antenna is coming back around, and you have this chasing pattern on the screen, on the display.
I also make an observation about what you're seeing visually here, because I got some oddball suggestions. Could it be a plane? First of all, it's too low. It's too low to water. You can see how large it is compared to the brakes, the wave brakes on the water. That's a large object. The other thing is, it's moving laterally from west to east. We should see a profile of a plane. We would be able to see it in navigation lights. You would see anti-collision beacons, and this is also flying way too low. It also has no sound. It's completely silent. Also, the blue light doesn't really correspond to the kind of lighting you get on a plane. It's
Right.
It's either red, green, or white.
So no, completely silent. So no obvious means of propulsion.
No.
Nope. Completely silent. It's and of course this is not something you can hear with just your ears. You got the noise of the water, the wave action, the wind at times. What we'll use is we'll use a parabolic dish with a very sensitive microphone on it, which is filtered from wind. There's wind socks on it and so forth. And they're going through. We're looking at the signal. We're listening to these signals with a very high gain instrumentation amplifier. So we're bringing this stuff out of the noise floor, to try to hear what's going on. We have filters that we have to screen out. We have to mask out that other noise, the waves, and that's what's occurring at different frequencies. So we'll go through it, and once we recorded the data, and we'll try to mask out these other sounds to try to listen for this object.
Well, that's the other thing. We had a parabolic dish on it. It's collecting the sounds, very directional. If you had a prop engine or a turbofan engine of a jet, we'd easily hear it.
Right. And we're cool because we're recording those signatures, and we're putting it through spectrum analysis too. We have all of this stuff goes to a spectrum analyzer. And the reason why we use that is because something called dynamic range. We want to look at the stuff from the bottom into the noise floor, into the basement, as well as the highest levels of signals. And the only way you can do that is visualize it is on a spectrum analyzer.
And the other thing I want to add is that same goes for if it's helicopter. The rotors of a helicopter are extremely loud. And if this is a drone, we would hear the quad fans going on.
Mm-hmm.
Gary, before that video popped up, you were saying you found it weird that it's mostly UFO people on the internet talking about this and local New Jersey news. It's not national news. What were you going to say on that? And someone else is wondering, how safe are we if there's no statement from Donald Trump, Elon Musk even, or President Biden yet?
I don't know. That's strange to me. There's emergency management organizations that would be concerned about it. There's actually one person we know that works in emergency management, and he's kind of flabbergasted at the response, and it doesn't really understand it. So I don't understand a not a more alarmed media response or from the authorities. It's I don't know. This guy's it's really strange.
Yeah, it really is kind of bizarre. It's and the other thing too is that you could have a safety a safety issue with this too. There's a safety consideration. Yeah. And this was brought up by I think it was the UAP medical group, Ted Rose group, and Keith Taylor was part of that. Keith Taylor actually works out by us. He's with the Suffolk County Sheriff's Department, and he's involved in in the meetings around the country with
Emergency management.
emergency management, with
Yeah.
other law enforcement groups.
It just shut light shuts it shut its light off.
Yeah,
It shut its light off.
yeah. So let me see if I can narrate this. So
And now there's two.
I don't know if you guys can see this. This was an area at Robert Moses called Democrat Point. I just got to set the stage here.
Well,
This
well
was
point out
yeah.
what we are seeing first.
Okay, yeah. So basically, the mobile laboratory, we're facing the southwest of this, almost like a peninsula out there, and this is an area of beach where the channel is. And this is late at night. This is roughly 2:30 in the morning, and we noticed that what you see over here, this is a parking area, and there's signs. There's a bunch of signs. These in the back are safety barrels with reflective tape on them, so you could see the safety barrels themselves reflecting the light back from the RV.
That's the linear lights that you see in a row across.
Right, and the same up here. These are barrels. This is a sign. This is a sign, and then you can see some other stuff in here
In the background.
in the background. I don't know if you can see my mouse pointer.
No, I don't see
Oh,
it.
okay. So on the left side here, you'll see a vertical column, which is part of the frame on the RV, on the mobile lab. Just to the right of that frame, you'll see less luminous lights behind the barrels. Those are not barrels. That was something, something either an anomalous. There's some kind of anomalous activity. That's all I can say. It's which is kind of bizarre because you'll see them in the center of the screen. These objects suddenly, you'll see them come up from the ground. There's a fence here behind those barrels, and they come up behind the fence, and they're actually sitting on an area of beach. So they're coming up. They're actually close to the beach, almost like that Manchester airport in England, where that object was sitting on the runway. That's what it looks like. It looks like they were floating just over the sand. And you'll see these objects come up, and they're rotating. They're actually rotating. And this is all in night vision. This is not visible light. This is all night vision.
Yeah, you'll see them suddenly appear, and some of them disappear. Some of them look like they rise out of the ground, and you see they raise up in elevation, and they'll go off to the right. They'll shift off to the right, to
the right field of view of the camera. Now I'll play it, and you'll see that, and watch closely. You'll see these objects. It's hard to tell at a distance here, but they're rotating, and they're moving to the right. That's one object there, and then you'll see another one behind it that'll suddenly appear, do the same thing.
It shut its light off.
You see it brightening. It's like rising from the ground.
And it's just, there's three altogether now.
There are three, just two others appear, so you got three of them now.
And they just fade out. They're rotating. They're cuboidal, I guess, polyhedrons. Rotating polyhedrons.
And you can see the rotation of one on the ground. You can definitely see it.
Now, this area that when we're looking at is 540 meters from the RV. So we were able to do, triangulation, determine its size, based upon what we see, the camera's field of view. Yep. And they're anywhere between 2 and 4 meters in diameter.
And you'll see that one object that was rose that's up in the air. It's moving towards the sign, moving to the right, and then moves behind the sign.
Yeah, so I'll move it back again.
Yeah, and
you'll see just in the center when those objects. All right, so again, they seem to move up from the ground, or they just. As they're moving, maybe the intensity changes as they're moving. I don't know, but you'll see there's three now.
Three of them.
And the one in the rear there disappeared. Now again, this is night vision camera. Nothing you can see in the visible spectrum. Certainly it was something I couldn't see with my eyes.
You can see the one on the ground disappeared. You'll see the one in the air still moving to the right towards the sign. And that's well elevated above the ground.
Right. And there's quite a few additional objects behind these barrels that we were seeing that night. But by the time we got the cameras out and started recording them, it's this is what we ended up, getting, sampling some of the activity.
And it
What
almost
would
looked like
your
they were punching.
estimation be of the amount of objects that would have been there?
I would say you can see one now here. I would say probably
Control.
greater than 15. Almost like they were perching on the beach,
There it
like
goes.
birds.
That just shut off.
Do you ever see normal military looking drones or like watching over any of this activity, like from a further distance?
Well, interesting. We had an event happen that we were actually filming some of these objects. We were I'm dating myself. I'm saying filming. Through the digital cameras. We were looking at them and we were hitting them with lidar. We were painting them with lidar. And when we hit the objects, we could see the reflection from the object. We could actually see it. So they were tangible. They had mass. They were reflecting light. And as I was doing this, there were several vehicles that were near that area, and they look like I mean, I can't be 100% sure, but they look like government vehicles to me. And
It would look like dark,
they,
Jeeps or
dark
SUVs,
SUVs,
doing dark
windows.
colors.
In one case, they actually had come out around the parking lot, and
Well, before you get there, they were observing the same thing you were observing when you're hitting with the lidar. When they saw the reflections of that, when they saw the lidar hitting it, or the reflections, they actually turned around and they approached it. They drove towards where we were.
absolutely, it elicited a response from them.
Mhm.
Let's put it that way. It's so they must have been looking at these objects as I in a night vision camera. They had to have been, because you can't see the lidar. You wouldn't be able to see the lidar. And that's when these vehicles had come out toward the RV with their headlights on the RV, the lab. And, of course, we have cameras. They can see there's a bunch of cameras and so forth, but they just maintain their position for a period of time. I could see some folks walking around the SUVs, and eventually they got back into them, and they shut their lights off and took off out of there,
Gary, you mentioned something happened August 28th that was a little unsettling. Could you tell us what that story is?
Okay, that's the night we arrived. We got there probably about 11 o'clock, and we were setting up our equipment. It takes us about an hour to set up our equipment. By 12 o'clock, John and I were in the RV, and on our central monitor, we have a large central monitor that looks at the ocean in front of us in both visible and infrared. We had noticed 3 orb-like objects in a triangular formation. They actually look more of it like scalene triangle, and it was just sitting there, hovering offshore above the ocean, just sitting directly in front of our vehicle. So John and I, while the other 2 researchers were setting up our equipment, we went down to the beach to get a closer look. We brought some of our portable IR equipment. What happened then is, as we got closer to the beach, my camera was picking up some kind of electromagnetic interference. It was affecting the video, it was affecting the audio on it. John had a higher resolution camera. So his camera wasn't as affected as mine.
Right. My camera was made out of metal case. It was shielded.
It had some like Faraday case.
The camera, Gerald has a Cynex Black, which
plastic.
Yeah, it's plastic case, so less shielding around it.
Right.
But you can tell that there was some kind of radiated emission, because you could see what they call in the old days, if you had an off-air channel, you'd see the graininess in the screen, or snow they would call it, or noise, a white noise. That white noise is what you started to see. It was almost looked like color confetti in his camera, but you could hear it in the sound as well. That in the intensity of something that was producing EMI, large amounts of EMI. My camera has an extended IR wavelength, with the ability to reach about 1200 nanometers, which is in the shortwave infrared band. So I was getting much more detail and a much more gain from the object. As Gerald, had been videotaping this thing, you could hear it getting, worse over time. As we got closer to the water's edge, we could hear the noise, get quite a bit worse. And at that time, I was I had I was using a lunar optics, and it had the rangefinder on, and of course it has an IR illuminator. So I had the rangefinder on and the IR illuminator. I was trying to illuminate these objects, and the rangefinder flashes at the rate of every second. It's a 1 second flash rate. When I was looking out over the water at this object, another object seemed to have come down just in front of it and kind of transversed its this field of view of what we were seeing, the triangular formation. And I noticed that a rectangular window, a polyhedron rectangular window, which was rotating, synchronized, and remained stable in one direction. And as I continued to paint it, I shut the illuminator off. After I guess around the 6th or 7th time, the rangefinder was still flashing at the rate of 1 second. So I could see this rectangular. All I can say is it looks like a car lens. If you shined a light into a car lens, you could see it takes on the shape of the lens. That's what this thing appeared to be doing. And it briefly remained stable. After hitting it again with the emitter, that object suddenly moved, or it seemed to move toward the shoreline. And what I saw within maybe a second or two, it was this rectangular field grow every time there was the IR flash, the laser flashed the rangefinder. I could see this thing was so much closer, and it literally I saw it flash 3 times, which would roughly be 3 seconds, and it was on top of us. I could see the light was overloading the camera. When I took the optics away from my eyes, I couldn't see a thing. There was nothing visible. When I put the camera back, I could see these large flashes of light. And at that point, I said to my brother, I said, let's move away from the shoreline. I have no idea what this is. It was startling, I should say. And it's as I turned to move away from the shore, I lost any ability to utilize my legs. There was no muscle tone. I had no strength. I couldn't coordinate my legs. I couldn't get them under me to pick myself up off the sand. And this lasted about 45 seconds. My brother, after hearing me, reached down to pick me up, and he collapsed on the sand as well with the same effect. And like I said, it lasted about 45 seconds before we had before we could actually control the movements of our legs to make it work for us. Basically, it's to get our legs under us and move towards the RV, which was 106 meters away, from the shoreline. Can't really wrap our heads around that one. That was very unusual. And during that period of time, my camera was still recording, and you could see these flashes of light streamers. You could see. Even though the camera is supposed to adjust for those bright, luminous periods of time where an iris system, a small diaphragm closes in front of the image sensor, so it doesn't damage the image sensor, that wasn't happening. Either the light was beyond the image, the iris getting into the image sensor, or something went wrong with the camera at that point. I also noticed that some of the memory settings, the double EEPROM settings, as they call it, the dynamic memory in the camera, which houses certain pieces of information to adjust the temperature and the settings of the camera. That was all corrupted, and I've been in the video field for a long time. I was a service technician, so I serviced cameras. I used to service some of the FLIR cameras and commercial equipment, and That's an oddity. Something like that where the double EEPROM memory that gets corrupted like that is generally corrupted with a high voltage transient. It takes 50 volts when you're programming this device, and on the outside, if there's a field of energy around the camera that got into the camera, that's what it looked like to me. That these memories were wiped out. They were corrupted. The data was corrupted. So I actually had to go back in there and reinitialize those settings.
I should also say that there was mechanical clicks going on the camera. There was operations of some of the.
Yes, that you could hear that. And of course, I wasn't manipulating that at the time, but you can definitely hear something.
No, there was some kind of external manipulation of the mechanical parts. Those mechanical parts. Also, in the optics, this light that was trapped in the optics was doing a bunch of things. These streamers there was flashes of almost like a scanning beam in there. You saw an orb-like light moving around in there. There was a lot going on inside that camera. Why we had lost the use of our legs for about 45 seconds.
Yeah, incapacitated.
Yeah.
So was some of the memory erased then of the footage of this actual incident?
Yes, it's the interesting thing is, the whole time I was recording the object out there, that part of the video was removed. That's all I can say is removed.
The
because
part
I never shut the camera off. I never took it out of record. It was still recording because it completed the files. The files were completed. The names were established. The attributes were established. You could see the file extensions, but parts of the video were missing. That which is kind of bizarre.
The parts where that thing was.
I expected the files to be completely corrupted, and they weren't.
The parts of the video where the object seemed to approach just to the shoreline. I actually got part of that on my camera. As something was reaching the shoreline, I had a large oval reflection on the water. It looked like maybe something overhead that was moving, orb-like object. It was like a bluish light on the water. And then when John went down, when I followed, I went down on the beach, fell down the beach. I swung the camera backwards, and I caught a wave of IR energy.
Yeah, it looked like a chevron pattern.
Yeah,
it was
expanding. It was an expanding wave of IR energy that overwhelmed us, and that's about the time we had this paralytic effect of our legs, or some kind of flaccid paralysis.
And there was also another secondary effect to that too.
Mm-hmm.
We had other team of people back at the RV. We had brought them back down to try to get additional data on this triangular object out there, and try to understand what happened to us. Gerald noticed in his night vision camera in the optics, the IR optics, that there was something on the beach that was basically within about 10 feet of where we were standing initially, and he got my attention, and I was looking at it. I looked at it in my IR system, my lunar optics, and I realized that there was a bright, it was intense beam of light, or intense source of light that was IR energy. It was IR. It wasn't visible. There was nothing you could see with your eyes, but in the cameras you could see this, almost like somebody shining a flashlight back at you. So we had walked over to this area, and we realized it was very tiny. The light source was coming from a krill and a shrimp that was only a few millimeters in size, which is quite amazing. It's and these crustaceans were dead. They were desiccated.
But supercharged with this IR energy.
Supercharged with IR energy. So that was puzzling. It lasted roughly about 45 minutes before that polarization of light disappeared. It slowly either discharged or bled off or whatnot, but it no longer gave off any IR after 45 minutes.
We also brought these two objects back to the lab to examine them. And we examined them under a microscope. We also ran a Geiger counter over them.
There was no elevated radiation.
Yeah, no elevated radiation, no bioluminescence, just this IR energy.
Mm-hmm.
But under a microscope, it looked like they were both desiccated, dried out, and both of them had large openings in their thoraxes, equal in size, and it looked like some kind of thermal expansion of the insides. that caused it to a blowout of the chest or revulse.
Mm-hmm.
As far as the paralyzation, at what point in the body did it stop? Was it from your feet to like
It was
your?
from the waist down.
Waist down. Yeah.
Okay.
It just affected the legs. It was like a surgical strike. It was it was very unusual. I mean, the rest of my body, I mean, I could coordinate. Gerald felt the same way.
Yeah.
The legs, of course, were you just couldn't, the messages it wasn't getting from the brain to the legs. You just couldn't coordinate, your legs.
No strength, no coordination, loss of muscle tone.
Right. And the next day, the only after effect we had, which lasted roughly between 24 and 48 hours, was seemed like our lymph nodes were inflamed because I had pains under my armpits, and tremendous amount of fatigue that lasted.
Yeah, I had tender lymph nodes in my neck.
Yeah, that lasted, I'd say, probably about, between 24 and 48 hours.
Yeah.
Did you consider going to a doctor to get medically examined about that?
We probably should have, to have it documented, but
at the time you thought that the doctor would send you to a psych.
Yeah, psych. Yeah.
Yeah. You don't want to mention that, but the thing is, we were still processing it too. It's not, you're not thinking clearly. You're trying to figure out exactly what happened to you.
Mm-hmm.
There was feelings of violation. It was, I mean, it didn't last long. I mean, I certainly didn't feel that way after, getting or feeling that I had a better understanding of what happened. But initially it was like, what just happened to us? It's what biological changes were made, that sort of thing. It's odd. It's an experience. All I can say is, it was an odd experience.
Were they protecting themselves, or what do you think the reason was?
We thought it was some kind of threat assessment. Like
right.
we were able to see them. We were shining this IR light at them, and maybe they did a threat assessment. They disabled us, and it looked like they surveyed our camera, our equipment. 3 of our cameras were affected. A third camera actually failed completely.
Yeah,
Our cameras were intermittent, but they came back.
Right.
Interesting for the threat assessment, because I heard the Tennessee congressman the other day saying we should just make it open season on these drones flying around. Do you think that'd be a good idea?
I don't think so.
Yeah, good luck with that.
Yeah, let's and this is just an IR emitter. I'm just shining light at these things it was invisible to us. We wouldn't have seen it. But apparently, they can see spectral light, it's IR light. And I guess I just annoyed them, it's at that point.
Well, they obviously didn't want to be seen because they were in the infrared. We couldn't see them visibly with our eyes.
No, that's right. The triangle, the objects themselves were completely invisible to the naked eye. It can only be seen in the infrared cameras.
Yeah.
Would you think the main reason, if they are not China, if they are UAPs, that the New Jersey police force and the military isn't shooting these things down is because of the potential threat of firing at them?
That could
Possibly.
be. That's a possibility.
Possibly. I mean, the thing that concerns me is that, and this was brought up by UAP Medical and Keith Taylor, like I said, he was a member of them. He's he's law enforcement out here on the island, and he's emergency management. But his concern is that, if this is the reality of these objects, and they're unseen by the naked eye, if they're unseen by us, as people, we don't know they're around. We're not aware of them, and what other effects could it have? What hidden dangers are there that we should be aware of? If somebody knows about this, and if the military is aware of it, that should be shared with the public, because we're open to that, and we can be victimized because of it. It's maybe it's benign, maybe it's maybe it's a byproduct of a propulsion system or something like that. Then we need to be aware of that. If they're invisible and we're not seeing it, there's no flight response, fight or flight response. So, we're not even aware that we're in some kind of danger. It's that's something that needs to be addressed.
Apparently, it came out today in the news that the special air services and special boat services, which is like special forces in the UK, are now investigating the UK drones that are over the UK and US combined air force bases there.
Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully that they start sharing some information. I mean,
Yeah, that
Do
might
you
be-
think someone's going to make some type of statement soon? Like, what's the possibility of that? Because
Oh,
it
boy.
seems like it's about time. I mean, what's the AARO around for if they're not doing that?
right. I think I think if people if these sightings are as extensive as they say, and more and more being seen, I think it's going to be inevitable that it's going to have to happen. It's that something's going to have to be said, or it's going to be discovered by the public, and that's it. It's accidentally or through catastrophic disclosure or whatnot. We will end up figuring it out on our own, and it's not something that I mean, if somebody's aware of this stuff, if they know that this hopefully you're thinking, and they're not talking because it's not it produces no harm, but I mean, that we don't know. I mean, but the information, some basic information needs to be shared. If they're admitting that this stuff is real and and they can't explain it, then share some additional information, share some of the safety concerns, what we should be looking out for, and I mean, we all have family members and stuff like that. Of course, what happened to us, we're concerned about them. We're concerned about family. Is there some permanent biological change going on? I mean, I have some medical issues right now that I'm dealing with, and I'm certainly hoping it's not as a byproduct of this thing, that we encountered. It's neurological problems and stuff like that I'm dealing with right now.
I know
Right.
there was a congressional meeting with Arrow. I think it was
Yeah,
yesterday.
Friday, right?
Yeah.
Or,
You're probably right. But we haven't heard.
it was confidential though, right? And nothing came out of it. There was some talk of saying they were Chinese by some of the congressmen before, but they weren't going on record about it.
Yeah.
And then there seemed to be nothing after, because we were expecting like something to come out, but I haven't seen one shred of news about what happened in there.
Right. It's like I said, so of course, with all the whistleblowers and so forth, it's obviously something's going on, and I mean, look, if it's a security concern, we certainly understand that, we get it, but there's no reason not to talk about at least the safety issues, the concerns that the public should have, or people doing research, investigating these things.
They blocked a medical helicopter from landing in New Jersey a couple days ago.
Yeah.
So that was the first sign that, okay, maybe there is some direct concern related to this.
And that would be a big concern.
Right. And I think some of that stuff was addressed, with FOIA requests, as far as some of the health related and physical ills that people have faced with some of these objects. I know there was a Canadian event where a young kid, a young boy, had RF burns on his body, walking up to one of these objects supposedly in a wooded area, and maybe he got too close to a propulsion system that is being generated, or something along those lines. But if this is in fact the case, that again, the public needs to understand that, stay away from it. It's or whatnot. I mean, we need to have some warnings.
Well, Canada had a big case, the Falcon Lake incident, where there was medical.
Yeah, it was a radiation burn.
Yeah.
But speaking of Canada, I got to ask you guys, because you're an expert on UAPs. We heard about the Chinese balloon being shot down. Then there was 3 other balloons. We don't know what they were. It never came out. But I don't know if you guys know this. I'll put a picture up. The Canadian News recently got a picture.
Yeah.
This is what was shot over the Yukon.
Okay, yeah, I saw that.
Yeah, that was no, like, you guys are experts. Does this look like a weather balloon?
It's
No,
very strange.
yeah,
I know they were
horseshoe,
trying to say
horseshoe-like
it was
appearance. Yeah,
yeah, they said there was something that was hanging from the undercarriage of the balloon, some equipment, but I don't know. I don't know what to make of that.
right, but
It looks luminous. Looks luminous.
right, but
It's
some of those objects, you know, even in the infrared, they do seem like there's some kind of a material that is being discharged from some of these orbs. There's an Afghan video out there and so forth that demonstrates this, but they're elsewhere as well. And I think Gary Nolan might have been involved in a materials study or research. That's something of
that's the council
material.
bluffs. He looked at it, some material that was alleged from objects. Somebody had dripped this material off.
Right. Right. So,
But do you find it strange that we saw the Chinese balloon, but we're now seeing the Canadian thing that was shot down, but we're not seeing the other two that were shot in the US?
That's very strange because it's right. They did share the information about the Chinese balloon, even the missile firing.
But
the weird thing is, why didn't they share the information of the other objects?
Right.
They claimed they shot them. They also were having a recovery operation. They canceled the recovery operations, saying it could be recovered. It doesn't really make a lot of sense either.
They would have the video of it being shot down, though, right? Because all of these, I don't know, F whatevers, film
35s or 22s that we used.
Yeah.
I heard that each of those missiles were $750,000, and one of them were shot twice. So if it was just a balloon, why did it take two missiles to shoot it down? I don't know.
Right.
Yeah, there's a lot of definitely a lot of open questions. That information wasn't shared.
Yeah. Yeah.
What those objects were is a question.
Right. And then the other thing is, were they in fact brought down? We don't know that.
Well, maybe they weren't brought down.
Yeah.
That's why they could cancel the recovery operations. They couldn't recover anything.
And the last question, because you guys have been more than generous with your time, you mentioned color confetti. Could you explain that? Because I think I've seen something like that on some pictures I've taken, and I'm just curious what that is.
So color confetti, it's a noise effect. It's color. You can think of it as white noise in color. In other words, these cameras have red, blue, and green amplifiers, and those amplifiers are basically amplifying something what they call within the lack of a signal, because that's how they convert signals. Is you got to modulate it with an oscillator, and the oscillator, with lack of a signal coming in, the oscillator is being amplified, and that's what you see. You see this noise on the screen, which is being generated by the local oscillator, or the oscillator inside the camera system. So they call it produces an effect like white noise. It's and it's if it's affecting color amplifiers, it'll be color. If it's just grayscale or black and white, it's going to be just black and white. Like the old days when you'd listen to the national anthem and the TV station goes off at night. And of course, I'm dating myself when I'm saying this. Back in the heyday of television and analog television, where the broadcasters would go off the air with playing the national anthem, and then suddenly the station would go off, and what would be left, because they're not broadcasting, is noise. That white noise. That's what you're looking at, and that's generated by the television itself. That's not part of what it's picking up over the airways.
Very interesting, because in one of these, and this is not it, but I found it interesting in this picture I took of 3 UAPs. Like, there was all these green and red dots around. Like, there's the one red one and the 2 white ones.
Right.
And I just found, is that color confetti? Because
yes.
I don't usually see that on pictures.
Yes, and that's good that you brought that up, because that's an interesting indicator that the camera has something, and that's the difference between the camera that Gerald had in mind. Mine was pretty clean. His had a lot of color confetti or noise that generated noise. That noise is there's a system in the cameras. They call it an automatic gain control. So if the signal's weak, if you have low light coming in and it's very weak, if the signal's very weak, whether it's because it's in a wavelength that the camera doesn't have the bandwidth for, like IR, infrared. And if it rolls off, it's not able to amplify that IR. The amplifiers in that camera will go to max gain. They'll automatically be set to max gain automatically. And when you have low light settings, that max gain will produce noise. It'll generate a lot of noise because the camera's maxed out. It's trying to pick up the gain on that signal so that you can see it, but it's reached the point of saturation. So that's what you see. You'll see that color confetti. So that's an indicator that whatever you're looking at is outside the bandwidth of the camera, or it's so dark that the camera can't get enough light in there. So it's maximizing its gain to try to bring in that light. And that's how we gauge, whether or not one camera is more sensitive to a certain wavelength of light. That's a good way of measuring it. And we do it by instrumentation. We actually look at those gain settings on the camera to see where they're at. If the camera was maxed out, we'll know that those levels are much higher because it's automatically adjusting the gain factors of the amplifiers to bring that signal in.
Mm-hmm.
We have a lot of New Yorkers and New Jersey area people that watch this channel. If they are to film something, if they see something and they want to film it with a cell phone, is there any tips that you would provide?
Yes. There's the cell phones are designed to because of processing speeds and stuff like that. They're designed to give you and it's sometimes it's an advertising gimmick where they're trying to give you maximum pixel resolution, and they advertise it like 20 megapixels or 30 megapixels or whatnot, and that's true that they are offering that resolution, but in order to get that resolution, you need very fast systems, memory systems in there, and large areas where you can store this video, because by compressing it down, the video, they're using aspects of the video, and the camera where parts of the video doesn't change from scene to scene, that's what's left behind. So they save that space. They save that space in the they call MPEG compression. There's different compression schemes, but the cell phone cameras are the worst. They highly compress the data, and if you're taking a picture of a stationary object, it looks beautiful, perfect. If the object starts to have motion, if there's any motion in there, then it undergoes this compression scheme where it's trying to buffer up this data. And what happens is that the quality of the videos they just fall apart. Like the video that we showed you. It's you see the objects around that are not, they're soft, they're not sharp, they're muddy. It's simply because the camera is compressing that data down. Because of the content, the amount of the content. There are applications that are available that allow you to record in what they call the raw video formats, where there's minimal compression or there's no compression. The only thing is those files can be very, very large, and you need a lot of memory for that. But if it's something like this, if they can take 5 seconds worth of video, 15 seconds worth of video, those applications are perfect because it'll retain the quality of the video to be able to pull out more data. The other thing is the cell phones have a very sophisticated sensor system. They got great sensor platforms. They have magnetometers. They have accelerometers. There's gravity sensors. There's light sensors. There's ways of recording the audio, and they go through all small software operated spectrum analyzers. So the cell phone is like it's like a physics toolkit, and there's an application out there that actually is called the physics toolkit, the physics toolbox, and it has all these apps where it'll monitor all these things over time. So you can monitor the magnetometer, you can monitor the accelerometer, the gravity, the G-force sensor, and all that other stuff. So you literally have yourself a test suite in the cell phone, and maybe that's some of that dual use technology. I don't know. That's being available for public consumption.
Very good. Well, thank you for all this information, and I'll let you guys close this off with whatever you want to tell the viewers.
Yeah, I would just say that if you see something, record it, talk about it. We'd love to see the data. We also want to reach out to other researchers and academics, the academia. That we are willing to work with anybody. It's if we're the boots on the ground, and and it moves up the ladder. The data is collected in such a way that it can be dissected much more deeply, through the academic community. That's the best way to go with this thing. It's working in silos is not going to help anybody. And the other thing is funding. Everybody's looking for funding. It's to maintain this work. It's very expensive. It's time consuming, and of course we're dedicating as much as we can. Of course, a lot of other groups are doing the same, but it's difficult, to do it on shoestring budgets. We've been fortunate with a couple of one funder in particular that was very generous, but nothing. It was a fraction at what it would have, what the bigger institutions are getting. But we're always looking to update our equipment. And if there's anything different that we need to analyze, we have to have the equipment and the resources to do that. And like I said, everything is put out there on public display anyway. And we're a 501c a 501c3 organization, so it's a not-for-profit, and whatever we use, it's for research purposes. And would like to continue it on a regular basis, and that requires having lots of volunteers and other folks that we need to take care of in order to keep going. I certainly can't do it. My Jerry can't do it alone, and with certain health issues, it makes it even more difficult.
Well, we'd like to expand this out onto the water.
Yes, that's
what phase 3. There's a phase 3 initiative that we would like, if it was funded, we could certainly take this to really dig in deep and look at USOs. Using a maritime version of the Nightcrawler.
Right, and that's something else. We want to collaborate with other professionals and academics. I mean, this is something. This is a shared project. It's where if we move into phase 3, like I said, we're looking into a water platform, with a vessel, with the state-of-the-art sonar equipment, omnidirectional sonar, side scan sonar, sophisticated radar systems, and
ROV
and ROVs, and we want to take this out on the shores where the activity is, and the only way we can do that is through funding. And like I said, even small amounts, you make a difference. Everything makes a difference.
Well, the other thing is, I'm pretty sure we could do it at a fraction of the cost of what's being asked for by some of the bigger institutions.
Right. You got to be dedicated to it. It's I mean, when we started this thing, I basically, liquidated my 401 in order to get started, and because we were that serious about it, and it's to keep going. You definitely got the resources.
Well, it's something that people can question. And so, who actually took their own money and invested it into their own project?
Right.
We did.
Yeah.
I don't know. I doubt you'd see that from the larger institutions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true.
Very good. Well, Nightcrawler, Eye on the Sky Facebook. There's a book on Amazon, and there's a website.
Yep, check out the website.
Yeah,
and the paper that's going to be released.
Where can they find the paper?
So the paper is on my website. You'll see it. You can actually read it. It's a PDF form. It was submitted to the Open Journal of Applied Science, and it's been accepted by four peer reviewers, and it'll be out this month. So
yeah,
like I said, but I've already posted for people to read it, and like I said, we're transparent. It's just it's out there for people to for public consumption.
Very good. Well, thanks a lot for your time, and keep up the good work.
Thank you. We appreciate it.